Welcome, everyone. I am Miguel Garcia, CEO of Infocel and co-founder of Axis Negocios. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Federico Wiesel. He's a distinguished partner at Spectra Investments. Spectra is a leading venture capital firm in Latin America, and they recently published a very insightful study exploring the perspective of entrepreneurs on the VC partnerships. And we are excited to delve into these insights and discuss implications with Fred. So, welcome, Fred. How are you?
Thank you, Miguel. I'm good. And you?
All good, thank you. It's great to have you here. To begin this conversation, can you talk a little bit about Spectra? What do you guys do, and what motivated you to basically conduct this study?
Yeah, sure. So Spectra was founded in 2012 as a traditional fund of funds. Over the year, we have diversified investment strategies. So we include basically everything that is in alternatives in Latin America. So we obviously do venture capital, but we also do private equity, special sits, search funds, which is a super interesting asset. Uh, and today we manage roughly a billion and a half dollars, and we invest not only in other funds, but also we co-invest alongside those managers directly into deals, and we also do secondary transactions. So this is actually the third time we conducted this study in Mexico, and we believe that the performance of venture capital is actually like a kind of like a virtual cycle in which good GPs will originate the best deals that will lead to better performance, that will make the GPs even with a stronger track record and have a stronger brand. So it's a virtual cycle in that way. So since we have that view, we conduct this study to understand who are the managers that the entrepreneurs respect the most and also why. And with that answer, we allocate our funds in those GPs. So the initial hypothesis we had back then, when we conducted the first interview, is that we would actually see more in the top rank VC GPs that had their headquarters in Mexico. But actually, what we are seeing in the data is actually the top three not having their headquarters in Mexico. So this was like an initial hypothesis we had back then, that actually the data from the first survey, the second, and now the third study present that is actually not the case.
Thank you. Very, very interesting indeed. So I noticed that you guys, one of the highlights that you mentioned in the study is, being entrepreneur friendly from a VC perspective, among others. So basically, I don't know if you can tell us about a little bit more about these particular traits, and specifically in the case of Mexico, how do they influence this relationship between the VCs and the startups?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point. I believe that entrepreneur friendly ranks high because I believe that entrepreneurs understand that the venture capital route is a long-term commitment. Startups presents ups and downs, especially in Latam. So it's much more volatile, the ecosystem here. And having someone in our cap table that supports all those ups and downs and the lonely seed of an entrepreneurs, it's an important one. So entrepreneurs really value that. And I think the specificity of Mexico and actually Latam is, as I mentioned, the volatility. The second aspect that was ranked highly was network. And we believe that network is like in one of the ways that a VC can add value. But at least in our view, we believe that it's kind of like the most tangible way that a VC can add value. So having a strong network of people, companies that could support you along the journey is very helpful. It is maybe like even more valuable than adding value in the board meetings and so on. So it's much more tangible than all of those other aspects. So those are the two aspects um, that entrepreneurs in Mexico value the most.
Okay. This is the case in Mexico, but um, there are differences, no, with European and US startups, and probably more specifically in within LATAM. I don't know, within regions. So I don't know if you noticed any differences from traits that entrepreneurs or startups value more than others within, I don't know, comparing the Mexican entrepreneurs with foreign entrepreneurs, or even within the Spanish speaking Latam, or even Brazil. I don't know if there's an interesting thing that you guys found out with this study within the cost contrast or differences within regions.
Yeah, so one of the contracts we found actually was those two aspects that I mentioned, being entrepreneur friendly and having a network. Uh, the entrepreneurs that answered that were mostly firms that had LATAM VCs in their cap table, and the entrepreneurs that had, for example, US or European investors, they actually ranked higher, having like expertise in a specific industry. So this is super interesting, this difference. But I honestly don't believe that this difference comes from a different need of the entrepreneur. It actually comes from the fact that LATAM is a shallower market than, for example, US. So LATAM is not deep enough for a fund to be focused solely in like one specific industry. You know, maybe having like a unique expertise in a niche market is not that attractive. So most of the VCs here in LATAM are more generalistics. We see some VCs in LATAM starting to focus, for example, in like SaaS, B2B, and a few in fintech. But maybe those are the two niches that makes more sense for a LATAM solely VC to focus on, and probably the other niche doesn't make sense. But for example, in US, you see many firms that focus only like on ad tech, biotech, like AI, retail, or several niches that in that market it makes sense for you to have that expertise. So I would say it's more difference on the supply of the VC we have here and outside than a specific demand of some entrepreneurs. But I understand that, for example, if you're an entrepreneur from a specific niche that is not common for LATAM VCs to invest in, you would probably value this industry expertise. So it would make sense for you to look for like US investors and European investors focus on that specific niche. That's the main difference on when we are seeing entrepreneurs having LATAM investors in the cap table and US and European investors in the cap table. But I would say we conduct this survey also in Brazil, and the criterias that entrepreneurs value in Mexico are pretty similar to what we're seeing here in Brazil. So I'd say the difference is more between LATAM versus US and in Europe, rather than a difference locally, like Mexico versus Brazil. I believe the criteria are much closer.
Yeah, one thing that I really was surprised when I was reading your study is that you know reputation of the BCs and track record usually is something that is very emphasized in the industry, and I was surprised that entrepreneurs don't actually uh, put a high rating on this trait. So I don't know what you think about that. What's behind this, or if there is any difference between regions again?
Yeah, I would say the insight here is actually the difference between the results on the first time we did, the second time we did, and now the third time. So that's when we saw things changing a little bit. So actually, the insight is this. So the second time, the last time we conducted the interview was, I believe, 2 to 3 years ago. It was in the bonanza time. So it was much easier to fundraise. And back then, entrepreneurs were valuing much more the reputation of the VCs, because I believe that they saw the reputation of the VC as a stamp of quality, and then they say, "Oh, okay, I have X VC in my cap table, So this is gonna make my life easier raising the next round. So it would increase the chances of raising a new round. And now it's a totally different environment. It's much tough to fundraise now. So actually, what we're seeing is entrepreneurs valuing more characteristics that would have a more tangible impact in the business itself and in the journey. So it's not actually on being easier to raise the next round, but actually the fact that it would actually add value into the business. So this is the main insight we have from this. It changed from like 2 to 3 years ago to now. And we conducted this survey in Brazil last year, end of last year. And also it's similar to what entrepreneurs are valuing now in Mexico and in Brazil. And also in Brazil, it changed from 3 years ago. So this is the main insight we have from this specific aspect you mentioned.
Very interesting. I think that these are good news. No, I think that these
Yeah,
trades should have more impact in in the real
I
world, or
agree.
in the actual operating of the and creating value of the from a entrepreneur standpoint.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I agree.
Uh, Talking about the players like the VC funds. Your study ranks certain VCs as the most respected among entrepreneurs. Can you talk a little bit about who they are and what key factors make them stand out?
Yeah, sure. So the three VCs that ranked as number one, two, and three is Kaszek, Monashees, and Valor, and they actually have they at least are perceived by entrepreneurs as having the criterias we mentioned uh, just recently. Um, but one thing that, and obviously, like we believe that one thing that obviously set these firms apart, although it was not ranked in the criterias, but it's actually their not specifically track record, but also like time in the market, dry powder, number of deals done in the market, the fact they are definitely active and viewed as relevant players for the ecosystem, definitely that put them apart. But entrepreneurs named a few criteria on those three firms, which is like network, quality of team, deep pocket, fundraising experience, quality of team, quality of analysis, entrepreneur friendly, and those are the key aspects that entrepreneurs uh, pointed out to those three firms.
Awesome. And finally, Fred, talking about the specific dynamics in the Mexican market, I think that there's a interesting dynamism. I don't know what will happen in the future, but it seems that there's a lot of activity going on here in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what should local VC firms do to kind of rank among the first in your studies, and most importantly, how can they help entrepreneurs from Mexico and also from other Spanish speaking regions to to create more value within their companies?
Yeah, this is a good point. What we believe is firms focusing on those aspects that we mentioned, being more entrepreneur friendly, creating a stronger network. Uh, but also one thing that we believe that is going to be a challenge for GPs and for Mexico as a whole, but Latam as well, is the fact that the some GPs are having difficulties fundraising, and I believe that those that can fundraise now and have dry powder, they are probably going to have. Uh, Usually, when it's hard to fundraise, it's good to invest, and the opposite is kind of true as well. So those VCs that can uh, fundraise now, they're going to have probably a better time going on. And another difficulties that we believe is actually for the VC ecosystem as a whole is that in 2020 and 2021 we were seeing many people leaving consulting firms to fund new startups. People after graduation looking to join startups rather than seeking more of like a traditional job. And I'd say that the opportunity cost to join the VC ecosystem is definitely higher. So I think the challenge VC faces now is how they're gonna attract talent, how they're gonna attract talent and keep the talent in the VC ecosystem. And also the second aspect that I think it's linked to the first is that I believe that Mexico still needs some more successful stories. It obviously have some, but it needs more. Brazil, I would say, is a bit ahead with more relevant exits and companies going through the whole process, like Nubank, Pismo, Resultados Digitais, and so on. I think we still need more in Mexico, and I believe that those successful stories they usually work as like sparks for new interesting stories. As I mentioned, like it's kind of like a virtual cycle as well. So interesting stories create um, more people willing to join that route. So those are, I believe, there are the two challenges that the ecosystem as a whole faces in Latam.
Awesome. Thank you, Fred. I totally agree. And finally, any news or any announcement that we need to be on track regarding Spectra and your activity in Mexico that you want to share in the coming
Yeah,
months?
no. So Spectra, as I mentioned, we have a LATAM scope. We've been investing in Mexico for many years now, and as I mentioned, we not only invest in venture capital but also private equity, search funds, special sits. So if you work in that space, you want to talk to us, feel free to contact us. We'll be more than happy to have a conversation. As I mentioned, we have dry powder. We just closed our fund six. So we are good to go to make new investments in the region, and we're super excited with the Mexican region.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Fred, and good luck with your sixth fund. I'm sure you guys will be very successful. We appreciate taking your time to talk to us.